Hello and welcome back to the American Patriots channel. I'm glad to have you here with me today. Have you noticed if you watch the news, either getting your news from the television or from the internet, a lot of the stories are negative. It's kind of a what's wrong with this picture type approach. Well, if you watch a lot of that, you start to get to feel bad about our country. You think there's so many problems. There's the Afghanistan crisis, the debt ceiling crisis, the border crisis, the crime crisis, or the racial inequality crisis. There's so many crises, it's almost as though, how are we holding everything together? Well, here at the American Patriots channel, we also addressed all of those problems. We look at the problem and dissect it and find out exactly what's going on. However, instead of stopping there like the other news stories, we go on to solve the problem, to suggest how we can fix our issues. So today we're going to be talking about prescription drug prices. Prescription drug prices are too high and we need to find a way to lower them so that they can be more affordable. Now, there was a recent study that said that 58 million Americans cannot afford their own prescription drugs. It turns out that we are paying about 90% more for our prescriptions than other countries. In fact, a study showed that that was true when they compared us with 32 other comparable countries. It translates to something like this. The average American, men, women, and children, pay $1,443 a year for their prescription drugs, whereas in other countries they pay $749, so about half, a little over half of what we pay. So you can see right there, we need to do something about this, especially since people have to choose between buying food or paying rent versus paying for their prescription drugs. And prescription drugs in many cases are essential for their health and well-being. So what are we going to do about this? The Democrats have promised to lower drug prices for many years now, but then the Republicans have been working on that same problem too. Why hasn't something been done? Right now, there's a bill in the House of Representatives, and it's called H.R. 3. It's entitled Lower Drug Costs Now. And yet it hasn't been enacted just yet. Now, H.R. 3 works this way. In Section 1, they take the 25 highest cost drugs, and then they allow the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Department to negotiate with drug manufacturers on those prices of the 25 highest. Now, that's in year 1, and then in year 2, they add another 25, so they go for a total of 50 of the most expensive drugs that there are. And they set two price standards. One is a target price. They compare our cost with what they're paying in 6 countries. And those countries are Australia, Japan, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. And whatever the lowest cost is in all of those 6 countries, they set that as the target price, the price that we would like to set in our country. So that's one price, the target price. And then the maximum price is set at 120% of the average of those 6 countries. So in other words, we're giving the drug manufacturers in our country a 20% leeway there over the average of what those other 6 countries are paying. So somewhere between the target and the maximum, a drug price would be established. Now, if we do enact H.R. 3, how much money could that save? Well, let's take a look and see exactly what is projected. For those with employer-sponsored insurance, H.R. 3 is estimated to save $39.5 billion per year. For those with Affordable Care Act insurance, $8.9 billion, and for those on Medicare, $48 billion, for a total of $96.4 billion in savings per year. This translates to about $290 in savings for every man, woman, and child in the entire country. Now, looking a little bit further at some of those specific drugs that are very expensive and how H.R. 3 would affect their cost, you can see the list here. The first one on the list is extremely expensive. Acthar, which is used for MS, the savings there would be almost $100,000 per 30-day supply. And I won't read all the others, but just to name a few: Eliquis, $98, Humira Pen, $2,161 per month, and then there's Trulicity, $176, and Xarelto, $79. So that's how Section 1 of H.R. 3 would affect drug prices. But there's more to the bill than that. Section 2 would limit drug price increases to inflation. And so here's some examples of how that would affect drug prices. Looking at a period of January 2020 to January 2021, the inflation during that period of time was 0.6%. So H.R. 3 would require drug manufacturers to increase their prices no more than 0.6%. And yet here are some of those that have been increased far more than that during that period of time. And you can see that they range from an increase of 10% on down to 7.9%. Well, all of those would be allowed to only increase their price 0.6% instead of what they actually did. Now, that all sounds well and good, that we reduce the cost of our drug prices, and in fact that we pay about the same as what other people are paying in other countries. But herein lies the problem, because that's going to cause some other problems. You see, Congress a lot of times will do something to try to fix a problem only to create more problems. Take, for example, the student loan debacle. Now, college is really expensive, sure, and yet we want everyone to have an opportunity for a good education. However, creating a student loan program, that might seem to solve the problem. Hey, look, everybody can get a loan, and then once they graduate with this nice shiny new degree and get a big job, they can easily pay that loan back, right? Well, not so fast, because when a person graduates from college, they usually don't have a lot of money. And in fact, they're going to try to save up for a car, save up for a home, and save up to maybe someday get married and support a family. So here they have this big boat anchor that's holding them back financially, and that is their student loan, and they got to make payments on that. So you can see that that solved one problem, but it created another problem. And so with this prescription drug H.R. 3 bill, it's going to solve one problem, but it's going to create another problem. What it's going to do is take money away from drug manufacturers. Well, what will that do? What that will cause is they will bring fewer drugs to market. And the drugs that they do bring to market, it'll take longer to do so. They'll have less money to generate and test all of these new drugs that they might want to bring to market. So, gee, great, you saved me some money, but then you eliminated some of the new good drugs that might come out in the future. In fact, it's estimated in the first 10 years there will be 8 fewer drugs brought to market because of H.R. 3. And then in the second 10 years, 30 drugs will not be brought to market on a general amount of about 300 in 10 years. So we would lose 8 out of 300 in the first 10 years and then 30 out of 300 in the second 10 years. So we need a smarter answer than H.R. 3. This is where we need to have people who really know what they're doing. We don't want to have another debacle like the student loan program. So what can we do about this? Well, for one thing, people will argue that this is socialized medicine. You're trying to set prices on these prescription drugs and change us into a socialist regime. Hold on a minute. Just stop for a moment with that. Of course, now our market system is a capitalist system, and it's the best kind of a system in the world because it fosters open competition. And we end up getting the best products at the lowest prices in general. However, notice in the prescription drug area, we're getting the best drugs, sure, there's some great stuff coming out, except we're not getting the best prices. Other people are paying less. So what did the government do when there were monopolies, when some companies were so big that they were actually not competing fairly with other companies? Well, they formed antitrust laws in order to correct that. So my point here is that capitalism is great, but you've got to intervene sometimes in order to not let it get out of hand. It's not socialism, it's just capitalism with intervention. So what is that? Let me describe that for you just for a moment. Capitalism with intervention is an economic policy that favors a free market system with open competition for goods and services. However, with government intervention where necessary to correct market failures and promote the general welfare of the people. Now, I don't think anyone would disagree that we need to lower drug prices, especially knowing that there's so many millions of people that can't afford their own prescription drugs. But at the same time, we need to be very careful that when we intervene, we do not upset the delicate balance of the capitalist market system. And yet, that's where H.R. 3 fails, because we know that if it is enacted, it will reduce the number of drugs brought to market and also delay those that are being brought to market. So this is sounding a lot like that student loan program because it's fixing one problem and it's creating another problem. So what can we do about that? How can we fix the drug price problem but not create more problems? Well, what we need to do is to promote drug development. And how do we do that? Well, we need to incentivize drug development. And here's how that can be done. I don't think it'll be a surprise to you that it costs a lot of money to develop a new drug. There's a lot of regulation involved because it's important to ensure the safety and effectiveness of a new drug that's brought to market. So the problem then is we need to offset those costs so that companies will be willing to move ahead and try out new drugs. And here's what we can do then. We can permit charging to provide reasonable costs for those receiving investigational drugs. Also, to provide funding and grants for research and development, to reduce or waive drug application fees, and to provide tax credits for clinical trials. And then here is the heavy hitter. If we allow a drug company, once they get approval to bring a drug to market, that they get a 10-year market exclusivity. Basically what that means is for the first 10 years, they are the sole provider of that drug. There'll be no competition whatsoever. Anyone who purchases that drug will purchase it from them. And that will help tremendously to offset their costs. So this will incentivize new drug development and eliminate those worries about some drugs not coming to market or others being delayed. These provisions need to be added to H.R. 3 in order to make it a comprehensive bill, one that resolves and addresses the prescription drug price problem, but at the same time doesn't create other problems. Prescription drugs are only a small portion of the overall issue, though, and that is that of healthcare costs in general. But H.R. 3 provides an interesting approach to solving the problem. I've addressed this in another video, and so if you'd like to learn more, look up my video on affordable health care for all. Well, right now, the Democrats are in charge of the White House. They're in charge of the House of Representatives, and they have a slim margin in the Senate as well. You would think that they'd want to pass H.R. 3, and of course I hope with these provisions added as well. But they haven't done so. Why not? This brings up another problem that we're having, one with our governmental system. There are 3 representatives in the House of Representatives, all Democrats, and these 3 representatives have voted no to H.R. 3. They don't want it to be put in place. Why not? Well, it's because 2 of the 3 at least are big recipients of pharmaceutical company donations for them to be reelected. And you can't blame them in a way. They want to get money to be reelected so that they can keep their job. Anybody wants to keep their job and not be fired or let go, and in this case voted out of office. So they favor the pharmaceutical companies with their vote to kill H.R. 3. This is a serious problem with our country because our politicians are supposed to serve us. They're supposed to serve the people, and yet in many cases, because of exactly this kind of situation, they are serving themselves by voting in favor of the big donors instead of in favor of what's best for us. Now, let me tell you who these 3 Democratic House of Representatives are so that you can contact them and tell them that you're not happy with their vote on H.R. 3. Here are the 3 representatives that voted no on the Lower Drug Costs Now Act. The first is Kurt Schrader of Oregon. I've given you 2 of his phone numbers there. The first is of his Washington, D.C. office, and the second for his local office. The second one is Scott Peters of California, and the third, Kathleen Rice of New York. And there are their phone numbers as well. If you are one of their constituents, please give them a call and tell them you are not happy that they voted no on H.R. 3. When you call them, tell them that the fact that H.R. 3 is projected to reduce the number of new drugs coming to market is no excuse for their vote against the bill. Instead, they need to add provisions to H.R. 3 that will incentivize new drug development, as we've outlined in our video here today. And also tell them that if they can't find a way to reduce drug costs by way of H.R. 3, that no amount of campaign contributions from pharmaceutical companies is going to do them any good because they're going to be voted out of office. Now, look at what we've done today. We've addressed one of America's major issues, drug costs. We've outlined the problem, but we didn't stop there. We went on ahead and came up with a solution. And not only that, but we pointed out some other things too. One is that our legislatures seem to not oftentimes do a good job of coming up with answers to our problems. They create problems with some of the things that they're doing. We need to have smarter people in office, ones that really can figure out how to fix a problem and not to create others. And not only that, but we need public servants in office, not people who are serving themselves and who are serving big donors. I don't know about you, but I can't afford to be a big donor like a pharmaceutical company, and yet their duty is to serve the people. Our government is to be of the people, by the people, and absolutely for the people. All right, so that's all I have for today. If you would, smack that subscribe button and click the bell too so that you're notified when a new video comes out from the American Patriots channel. We'll have many more answers to some of the significant problems that America faces today.